Court is now in session. Judge Newman presiding. Please be seated.
Good morning. Next witness.
Your Honor, the state would call Jan Malinowski. Your Honor, may I approach you?
Yes, ma'am.
Do you affirm the testimony you have with the court in this trial shall be the truth, so help you God?
I do.
State your name again for the record.
Yes, ma'am.
Spell your last name.
Jan Malinowski.
Mr. Malinowski, how you doing today?
Very well, thank you.
Good. If you would, introduce yourself to the court just a little bit. Obviously, we're not in front of a jury, but just so the court knows who you are, tell us just a very quick history of how you got to your current position.
I'm currently the president and CEO of Palmetto State Bank, headquartered in Hampton. Started my banking career out of the Citadel, 1977. Went on to graduate school at the university. Upon completion of master's program in Columbia, joined the Wachovia Bank and Trust Company, went to Zurich, Switzerland. From there, went to Barnett Bank in Miami, Florida, and subsequently traveled Europe with the old Barnett. Moved to First Union National Bank in Savannah for a brief period of time, and then in February of 1991, joined Palmetto State Bank.
And currently you serve as the CEO, is that right?
That's correct.
And how long have you been the CEO?
Since August of last year.
August of 2021?
Yes, sir.
And who was the CEO prior to you?
Russell Lafitte.
And was he terminated not long before you became CEO?
Yes, he was.
Back in June of 2021, what was your role at that time?
I was executive vice president and responsible for branches in Beaufort. We have 2 branches in Beaufort.
All right. And were you also a member of the board of directors of the Palmetto State Bank?
At that time, yes.
And you mentioned that you were in charge of some branches in Beaufort. Could you explain just a little bit to the court about sort of how it operated then with the branches in Beaufort and the branches perhaps in Hampton or elsewhere, please?
Yes, sir. At the time, we were about a $700 million asset bank. We have 7 branches, operated somewhat decentralized. I was given responsibility in '91 for the 2 offices in Beaufort, as I said, one in Burton location and one on Ladies Island. Other officers of the bank would be responsible for the other branches, Hampton being the main office, and then with Allendale, Fairfax, Estill, and Bluffton.
All right. You say y'all are a little bit decentralized. Is it fair to say that for the most part, you were primarily responsible for the operations in Beaufort and someone else was primarily responsible for the operations in the Hampton area?
Correct.
And who was primarily responsible for the operations in the Hampton area?
Russell Lafitte and his father, Charlie Lafitte.
And when you say somewhat decentralized, obviously there was a board of directors that looked at the institution as a whole.
Yes.
But in practice, there was kind of a deference to the local folks on scene, you being in Beaufort and the Lafitte's being in Hampton. Is that correct?
Yes.
All right. I'm going to ask you to explain just a little bit though, about the board of the directors and the executive committee. And again, if you could briefly describe to the court what those two entities are and how they operate so that we can understand the next questions.
Well, the board of directors of the bank has the absolute authority and responsibility to run the bank, but they delegate the day-to-day managerial responsibilities to officers. Charlie Lafitte was long-serving CEO and chairman. Russell, COO, subsequently became the CEO. I was executive vice president and ran the two branches. But board of directors would delegate the, as I said, the day-to-day control to the executive committee and certain senior officers.
And when it came to authorizing loans, what was the role of the executive committee in authorizing certain loans? Was there a threshold, and how did that work?
There is a threshold. The board of directors would authorize individual loan officer loan authorities on an annual basis, branch managers having a certain level of authority, and then executive officers having a higher loan authority, and then organizationally, two executive officers could approve a single loan or a up to X million dollars, and then once it got beyond the threshold for two executive officers, it would go on to the executive committee, which would review the loan request and either approve or deny any loan that exceeded $1.5 million.
At the time, in June of 2021 or thereabouts, in that area of the year, were you the secretary of the executive committee?
I was.
All right, and I'm going to show you what's been marked as Exhibit 354 to your testimony, and see if you recognize that document. And, Your Honor, I have a copy for you. I provided one to the defense. Would you mind handing that to the judge for us?
Yes, sir.
All right, do you recognize that document?
I do.
Tell me what that is, please.
It's in the minutes of the executive committee of August 12th of 2021.
All right.
And a number of topics were discussed, but primarily the relationship of Richard Alexander Alex Murdaugh and his total relationship with the bank.
All right. And this is on August 12th, 2021?
Correct.
Can I get the elbow, please? Thank you. All right, so these are the minutes that you're referring to, is that correct?
That's correct.
All right, and there's a discussion right there, including reference to a memo that was distributed outlining the bank's relationship with Alex Murdaugh, is that correct?
Yes, sir.
And there's a reference also to the total indebtedness that Alex Murdaugh had to the bank at that point in time.
Yes, sir. As of the day of that memo that was presented to the executive committee, Mr. Murdaugh owed directly or indirectly $4.2 million.
$4.2 million, is that correct?
Yes, sir.
All right. I forgot to ask you this, but tell me real quick, when do the board typically meet, and when does the executive committee typically meet?
The executive committee typically meets on the second Tuesday of every month, and the board meets on the third Tuesday of every month.
I'm going to show you what's been marked as Exhibit 385 for the purposes of this in-camera hearing, and see if you recognize that document.
This is a copy of the minutes of the directors of Palmetto State Bank describing what took place at a board meeting on Tuesday, July 20, 2021.
All right. And who's the secretary that authored those minutes?
Ray Henderson?
Okay. And you were present as a board member for this discussion?
I was.
All right. And what's the date again on that particular one?
July 20, 2021.
July 20, 2021. At that time, was there any discussion or any record of a discussion of any loan to Alex Murdaugh for $750,000?
No, sir, there is not.
All right. Again, that's July 20th, 2021.
That's correct.
All right, going back to this August 12th, 2021 Executive Committee notes, I want to walk back just a little bit and tell me, was there, did Alex Murdaugh come up in any discussion among the board members prior to August 12th, 2021?
Yes, it did.
Tell me about that, how that happened, please.
On August 9th, Norris Lafitte, a board member, sent an email to members of the executive committee and the board asking for a full accounting of Mr. Murdaugh's relationship with the bank.
All right, and can you pull that mic just a little bit closer?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. All right, and what happened after that? Did that spark any particular activity?
Sparked quite a bit of activity, conversation, and then activity inside the bank that day.
All right, and explain that to the court. What happened?
Shortly after Mr. Lafitte, Norris Lafitte sent his email to members of the executive committee and the board. A deposit was made to Mr. Murdaugh's account in the amount of $400,000, which cleared up an overdraft, a large overdraft, which had been in his account that day.
All right, and who caused that deposit to happen?
Russell Lafitte.
All right, and so there was a significant overdraft in Alex Murdaugh's account?
On that day, yes, sir.
Was it over $350,000 overdraft?
Yes, sir.
And so Russell Lafitte caused a $400,000 to be deposited into his account?
Yes, sir.
And that was after the email from Norris Lafitte asking about Alex Murdaugh on August the 9th?
Yes, sir.
All right. At that time, that Russell Lafitte caused $400,000 to be put into Alex's account to cover a over $350,000 overdraft. Were there any loan documents or any sort of application or anything in existence supporting any such disbursement?
No, sir.
Just put the money in there.
Yes, sir.
You mentioned other activity. What other activity was sparked by that August 9th email?
There was some activity to create an application to go through our typical loan approval process through one of our underwriting programs, software driven.
Okay. All right, and we're going to look at those documents here in a minute. All right, I'm going to show you what's been marked as State 356 and see if you recognize that.
This is a photocopy of a page 2 of a deposit checking account statement
And that's,
in the name of Richard Alexander Murdaugh.
all right, and what does that reflect on August 6, 2021, what the balance was in his account?
A overdraft balance of $347,784.67.
And what happens on August 9th, 2021?
A deposit of $400,000 is made to this account.
All right, and we see after that there's a transfer to checking of $20,000 that's done as well?
Yes, sir.
And do you know what the purpose of that transfer was?
No, sir, I don't.
So right there on August 6, 2021, Alex's account was negative $347,000. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
And then off the books, Russell Lafitte caused $400,000 to be put into his account. Is that right?
Yes, sir.
All right. Let's talk more about that. I'm going to show you what's been marked as Exhibit 357 to your testimony and see if you recognize that.
This is a copy of minutes of the directors of Palmetto State Bank dated August 17th, 2021.
Okay. And who was the secretary for these? Do you know?
Gray Henderson?
No. And were you present for these board meetings?
I was.
All right. And these minutes accurately reflect what was discussed at the board?
Yes, sir.
We'll turn over to the second page. And was there a discussion at that time about, and again, this is on August 17th, 2021, was there a discussion about loans to Richard Alexander Murdaugh?
There was.
All right. And is there a reference there of Alex's intention to sell the farm?
Yes, there is.
All right. And then is there a reference in there to the extent of Alex's liability in total loans?
Yes, there is. $3,544,897.
All right. And was there then a discussion of additional loans that Alec had been charged off?
Yes, there were.
Okay. And very quickly, are you familiar with two entities called Zero United and Redbeard?
I am.
And are those entities associated with Alex Murdaugh?
They are.
And are those loans that, in fact, the bank had charged off?
That's correct.
All right. And explain very quickly what a charge-off is, without too much detail for these purposes.
Certainly. In a situation where a loan is deemed non-performing to the point where the bank's executive committee and/or senior management decides that it's time to take it off the books, you charge it off. It's an accounting treatment, but it doesn't remove the obligation of the borrower, or in this case, members of the LLC, any legal obligation to repay the loan.
All right. And so Alex Murdaugh was still on the hook, required to pay those loans. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
And were there real properties associated with both of those loans?
Yes, sir.
And in the event Alex Murdaugh had tried to sell those properties, would the bank expect to be paid any outstanding balance plus interest and all the rest of it?
Yes, sir.
And in fact, was Alex still paying on those notes even though they were charged off?
He had periodically, yes.
And so the ultimate liability to the bank for Alex was somewhat larger if those are included. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
There's discussion in here about a $750,000 loan in this particular board discussion. Is that correct?
Yes, there is.
And this is on August 12th, 2021, I believe. Is that right?
The date, I think it's 17th.
17th, excuse me. Had you been aware of any sort of $750,000 loan to Alex Murdaugh prior to these discussions coming up as you move to the board meeting on August 17th, 2021?
Only to the extent that $750,000 loan had been referenced during the executive committee in the memo that was referred to in my executive committee minutes.
Which would have been shortly or a couple days before this, is that
Yes,
correct?
sir, preceding week.
All right, and at the time that the $400,000 had been dispersed back on August 9th, there was no loan paperwork in existence at that time, is that correct?
No, there was not.
All right, was that the only disbursement made pursuant to this supposed $750,000 loan?
It was not the only disbursement.
All right, well, stand by for me. first packet I gave you. I'll show you what's been marked as States 358, and see if you recognize that.
It's a wire request form on our standard documentation dated July 15, 2021. The Palmetto State's going to wire funds to South State Bank. The beneficiary of the wire is the Wilson Law Group, LLC, to their IOLTA account in the amount of $350,000.
$350,000 to the Wilson Law Group?
Yes, sir.
All right. And then what's the next page in this document?
Are the wiring instructions to the Wilson Law Group.
And does it have contact information?
Contact information is to Chris at wilsonlawgroup.sc.com.
All right. And is that Chris Wilson, the lawyer in South Carolina, in Bamberg, South Carolina, excuse me?
As I currently understand, yes, sir.
This is on July 15th, 2021.
Yes, sir.
$350,000 was wired to Chris Wilson.
Yes, sir.
Was there any documentation, loan application, any sort of paperwork whatsoever justifying Palmetto State Bank sending $350,000 to Chris Wilson?
No, sir.
All right. And then whose benefit was this sent for?
Alex Murdaugh's.
Alex Murdaugh's. All right, let me ask you about this, and I'm going to put it up on the screen. And right now, there, it says sender information, and what does that say right there, please?
Palmetto State Bank, LNOS.
All right, and can you explain very quickly what LNOS is, what that is?
It's an account the bank maintains. It's called Loans Not on System.
Okay. And should this wire have listed that as the sender?
No.
And explain that to the court, please.
Had loan documents been signed that day, the sender would have been the borrower on the loan. In this case, it would have been Alex Murdaugh.
But that's not what was listed, is it?
No, sir.
I'll show you what's been marked as 359 to your testimony and see if you recognize this document.
This is the customer copy of the cashier's check in the amount of $400,000 that was deposited to Alex Murdaugh's checking account.
All right, and is there a sticky note on there, a copy of a sticky note?
Yes, sir, there is.
And what does it say, if you would, please?
It says Alex Murdaugh, $750,000, one share of Green Swamp Inc. stock, and the date is 7/15/21.
We're going to talk more about that in a minute. I've got states 360 and 361. Just real quick, I'm going to show you those and see if you recognize those.
The top document is the checking deposit slip for credited to $400,000 to be credited to account 69406092. The account holder name is Alex Murdaugh. The date is 8/9/2021. And then we see a copy of the cashier's check dated 8/9/2021 in the amount of $400,000.
All right, and then the next exhibit, 361.
Next exhibit is the debit to the Loans Not on System account in the amount of $400,000, which was the source for the cashier's check in the same amount.
And the date on those again?
8/9/2021.
And that was the same day that Norris Lafitte sent an email to the board directors making an inquiry about the bank's relationship with Alex Murdaugh.
That's correct.
Just a couple more.